thank you for attending today's webinar. We're excited you made it today. Let us know where you're watching us from. You can put it in the social fields I'll be monitoring, as well as the Zoom account. So we'll get started here as we're covering Maestro Designer, working with the data, and we're very happy to have with us Yaron, who is one of our specialists in this field. So we're excited for his session today. So quickly, the housekeeping items. As you know, if you're attending through Zoom, your audio is muted, and these sessions will be posted back to avid.com so you can look at it later or share it with your friends and colleagues. I can't talk today, so forgive me. So with that, go ahead and let us know where you are watching us from. It looks like we have someone from Brazil and Colombia, so welcome. Someone from the UK, Ireland. That's a good one. Haven't seen Ireland in a little while, so great. Happy to have you attending. As we mentioned today, we have Yaron, who's going to be covering this great topic about working with the data. He's been with Avid for a while, and he's one of our RTG artists, specialists, I would like to say. So, Yaron, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to you because I know you have a lot to cover today.
Thank you, Don. All right, so hello to everybody, and today we're going to actually talk about working with data. Now, since most of us are going to be working with databases coming from outside sources, in this session, we are going to show how we're going to work with them within Maestro Designer. In most cases, the application is technically going to show us, the control application is going to connect the data itself. So here we're going to talk about internal connection and math function. After that, we're going to actually create bars and create a data ticker. To show you how everything is basically working together, we are going to work with Maestro Live here. So we are going to eventually create this scene. Now the background of this scene, just a second here. Okay. So, all right, so our background is actually a virtual studio, which we're not going to go through. We went on virtual studio in a different session. If you've seen Sebastian's session, he went all over how to create all the math functions, but we're going to do an overview anyway. So in this specific, we will be able to launch our ticker. This ticker is connected to a database. In this case, it's an Excel file, but it can come from any data source. And our bars, which could be, again, connected to a database. In this case, I'm just tapping in the different values, creating a change animation between them. And I also can change between different colors in case I would like to change a color on the fly. I can do that by changing the colors, and it all changed dynamically. So we'll go back to our beloved purple. And now let's go into Designer and see how we are actually creating all of it. So I'm just going to quickly stop this here. All right. So into Maestro Designer, I'm going to connect our render engine. And we are ready to work. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to create a new scene. In this case, I have my scene already ready, but I'm going to start from scratch. So we'll go into our templates and we'll select a completely new template. For the background, I usually use an image. In this case, yeah, let's use an image. I'll create a texture for the image just to give us some reference so we can see what we are working with. And we're going to enlarge it so we can actually view the image as it was a virtual set. Just to save some time, I'm not actually creating a virtual set, but at least we'll have the reference. All right, so that will be our background. We'll call it BG. Again, to save some time, I'm not going to do all the animation I've shown you before. This was covered by Philip's previous session. So we're just going to jump directly into working with the database. So I already have an asset for the cube already prepared in advance. Just to go over how this cube is built so you'll be able to build it by yourself. I have a cube, which I actually, in each different cube that you see here, that's the same object, basically referenced by the positioning. And for each one, I change what I'm seeing, if it's the front or the top of the cube. And each cube is basically showing me a different part. So we'll get the glassy look for that cube. So you can see we're getting the glassy look of the cube. And we can control the height and width of the cube, the positioning. All of those we can control. In this case, I'm going to make the actual cube slightly thinner, so it will look a little bit more like a bar. And I'm going to control everything from the bar itself. So from the cube, that's going to be basically my main control. Now, since I just want to make the bar go up and down, this is the animation that I wanted for him to grow. I'm going to create a very simple animation from 0 to 1. This will make more sense a bit later. So I'm going to create an animation between 0 and let's say 20 frames. It's about enough. 0 to 1. And I'm going to make sure my animation is slightly smooth. So I'm going to open up my animation. And by right-click edit, I can go into my acceleration. I'm going to use the acceleration and make it start fast and slow. Will give us a nice growing effect. Now, since everything is being controlled by the cube, I'm actually going to make all the functions within it. So I want to have an export to able to be controlled what will be my actual value. So I'm going to create an export. This will be the bridge between the external programs, such as Mastro Live, and the internal functions within here. So that could be named, let's call it just bar value. So we'll know what we're working with. And in this case, we're already starting to create our function. So let's go and right-click on the Y position, and I'm going to create a function. Now, about the functions, like I said, we're going to do a little bit the functions overview. So our functions are basically combined with math functions that can be include everything that you see here. So we have variables, which stands, our main variables are A, E, I. A stands for our animation value, E for the export value, I for the internal connection value. Now we can add up to 9 internal connection into this same object and create a more elaborate type of function. We will see that later on. We have all kind of operations such as add, minus, duplicate, and so on. We have statement, if statement, else statement, and all kind of different mathematical functions that we can use, such as max, min, cosinus, sinus, tangents, and so on. Everything that we have learned in school, this is where we actually apply them. And we have ability to play with the text itself, such as the length of the string, the prac, which is the number of decimal point that we can control, and so on. There's other information that we can go over. Again, we're not going to go through everything, but it's all in our user manual. You can find all of this information if you want to go one by one and see what they are doing. So in this case, what I want to actually do, I want to be able to calculate the animation time in each frame of the animation. I want to calculate my export, because my export is going to be a number. Mostly the export is going to be a number between 1 to 100 if I want to use a percentage. I can use other variables, but then we'll have to make a factor in order to calculate the difference. And I want all of that to be in a more specific manner. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to say that the animation times my export will be divided by 100. Sorry, that's divided by 100. And why am I dividing it by 100? If I'll take that export and I'll give it a number such as 88, this number is completely big. If I will not divide it by 100, it will be way off outside of my screen and I will not be able to see my animation. So if I'm playing it, you see it flies way above my range. So I'm going to divide it by 100 to keep it in a better range so I can play with it. If I want to make this box slightly bigger, like you can see, I put all those cubes inside a parent cube, and this parent I can actually stretch the Y in order to make my end result bigger. So just by completing this very, very useful function, I already set up the size that I want for my cube to behave. The next stage will be to grab a text, sorry. So I'll go into my primitives. I will go and grab a text. This could be connected to any place. In this case, I want to use what we call an internal connection. Internal connection is technically referencing the parent property to the child property. So if my parent is going to be my cube, my child is going to be the text. And if we have parents between us, you know that the parents can tell the child what to do, but not the opposite. Now, this is sometimes true in most cases. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the bounding box, which is the area where our object is contained. And I'm going to say that I'm going to use the top of the cube's bounding box, and I'm going to connect it into the X, Y position with the internal connection. So I did out connection from the bounding box, in connection into the text. And when I'll do connect, it will directly jump to that specific area. Now, since my cube here is slightly forward, I'm going to move it back again. Just my background here is on the 0 scale, so I'll take it a bit backwards so it won't be in our way. Okay, so now you can see that the text is actually right on the top of my cube. If I'm going to play with the animation, you'll see that the text is always fixed to that specific position. Again, I can change that position. If I'm going to use, again, met functions, I can add a function to this text in order to move it to the right place. If I don't want it to be on the top, I can change the location of the actual text. I can go into the text properties and say, okay, I want it to be from the bottom or aligned to the top, which is going to slightly change the position of my text. In this case, I want it to be a bit in front of it. So I'm going to just change the IOP so it will be in front of my text here. So again, I can go into my math functions. I can go into create function here, and then I can manipulate the I, my internal connection, and I can either add a value or remove a value. So I can do add 0, sorry, plus 0.1, for example, and you'll see that it's slightly on the top. I can actually use it as a minus for the opposite. In this case, I just want to make a minus 0.1, so it will be slightly underneath, maybe even slightly more. 0.1 is very close. So right now, my text has always a little bit different from the top, so it will not be at the top of it, so I can do my animation. But since I want to see what my text result, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another internal connection. This time I'm going to take my end result. So I'm going to take the whatever result I have in the Y, which is the export divided the animation times the export divided by 100. I'm going to do, again, out connection. And I'm going to do in connection into the text string in order to see the actual result. So if I'll do connect right now, you'll see that I have the result 0.88, which is, if I'm going to take a look here, I'm going to see that it's the result from the Y. So when I'm playing, you can actually see it move. Now this is all very, very nice, but this won't be the actual number that I want to represent. I want to represent percentage. So what I can do an additional math function, this time to manipulate my end result, which is the text string. So I'm going to do a function on my text string. And this function is going to be, I'm going to say, start with prec. Prec is basically the number behind the decimal point. Since I want to use the, I want to show how many, a certain amount of decimal points, usually 2 or 3, depends on what your producer wants to show. So I can do prec, and the number of decimal points that I want to show, so it can be 0 or 2. And then I'm going to say that I want the I, which is my internal connection. Since our number was divided by 100, I want to show the actual number in 100. So I'm going to do duplicate by 100 and close this. And this will actually show me the decimal points and my animation so I can see the actual number. In case the producer doesn't want any decimal points, all I have to do is change the number of the prec, and then we can disregard decimal points altogether. In this case, I'm going to leave the decimal points or just keep it as 1. Of course, I'm going to need to make my text slightly smaller. It's a bit big. So I have here my text, and I can play and see it. And if I'll change the export, I'll go to my export, change the export to any different number. So let's say 56. And now I'm going to play it. You see it will go to 56 and so on. So anytime that I'm going to change that value, it's going to reach that maximum value when it does the animation. Another thing that I can add, just to make sure that I always see percentage, I sometimes don't receive the percentage number from my end user. Sometimes we need to edit by ourselves. So to do it, we're going to do something very, very simple. We're going to do a plus and put a empty string, basically. So I'm going to start a string, a quotation to represent a string that I want to put in. Percentage, I'm going to close that string. And now I always have that percentage showing. So when I'm playing, it will always play with that percentage. Please, in any time, if you have any questions, please put them on the chat. I will try to go over all of them. I will answer all of them by the end of the session. So we have our bars now. Quite easy. You can see I got my bars. I'm going to put all of them in just one group so I can technically copy this group over and over again and reuse it. So, and I'm going to take that animation and I'm going to call it bar in. Now the little magic that we have inside Designer, and if you don't want to make the, again, the animation from start to end for the out, we can just do clone our animation and mirror it. So now when I'm going to do the out animation, I have my out animation and go back into in animation and play it in and out. And I can then control within the control application exactly what I want to show. So this is going to be our bar. So I'm going to call it 0, 1, just in case I want to duplicate it. 0, 1 will help me to know which one it is. Now, the next thing we are going to do is going to do the data for the ticker. So for the ticker, we're going to use our ticker object. So I'm going to bring in my ticker here. The first thing that I want to do, I want to make sure that my ticker is actually working, and I want to align it to the best of where I am. So I'm going to do play the ticker. I'm going to use a clipping plane. Clipping plane will basically cut the ticker in a certain area, so I won't see it reoccurring. And I'm going to move that entire group into my desired area. So in this case, I'm just going to show the safe frame, and I'm going to put my ticker and make it hide right on the edge of the safe frame and take it a little bit down. Inside my ticker group, I'm going to move it down a little bit more later. You'll see that we have what we call the show ticker group. The show ticker group will basically show us how the ticker looks like. This is not going to go on air. We're going to hide it while we're going to go on air. This is more for us to create the ticker and see how everything is working. A few more things I want to do with the ticker. I actually want it to be quite smaller, quite big for a ticker. So I'm going to make the ticker text smaller. I'm going to make it a lot, with the width a lot bigger. So it's going to start from the edge here. I know that I want my offset to be slightly smaller, and this is because I'm going to use some backgrounds between them, but this is very individual, how you want it to see, how you want it to look like. And the frame, the item count. Now, since the item count is how many items I can see at the same time on air before the loop repeats itself. If you have a long stories, like in a news bulletin or something like that, usually 5 is enough. But since we're using stocks and we're going to create stocks, sometimes we may have very short stocks names like 3 letters or stuff like that. So we may have a lot of items going on there at the same time. So we want to make sure we have enough. So I'm going to just keep it at 10. That way I know for sure that I'll never have a open space between the loop when it repeats itself. So when we are building our data inside the group, first thing I want to do, I'm going to go back to my asset that I've created, and I'm going to actually bring it within the ticker group. I'm going to, again, use the actual ticker box in order to align the size to the size that I want it to be. I'll take it slightly backwards, and it needs to be in front of the text. All right. And one more thing that I want to do with it, I want to actually make sure that the cube actually builds from the right perspective. So I want to make sure it starts from the left. So for each one of those, I'm going to set it up for growing from the left side in order, oh, sorry. Yeah. So when I'm actually growing, when it'll actually use the scale of it, so it will scale from the beginning to the end. Now, my first text group here, my first text is actually going to be my code, my value. So I'm just going to rename it to that code so I'll know what I'm playing with. The next thing that I want to have is I want to have the value. So I'm going to have the code value or value code, doesn't really matter. And I may want to add later on a percentage, but for now we'll keep it this way. I'm just going to add another text with percentage. Later on, we may want to do it. Depends on our needs, so we can hide it and show it. I can also do it as a math function like I showed you before, but in this case, it will work better with an object. So one thing I want to make sure is that my text is always aligned to the right place. Since my data code is always going to be on my left side, so I'm going to use the bounding box from the right side of it because I want the right side, the end of it, to affect the actual value. So I'm going to do out connection from here. I'm going to go back into my value. And in the value, I'm going to do in connection in the Y, in the X, and connect. And now I'll have always this value after my text. So just to show how it will actually be. So if this text is, for example, NASDAQ, for example, and this value will be the number. So we have like 0.55, for example. So now you can see have NASDAQ and 0.5. Now I do want to make a little bit of difference between them because I don't want always the NASDAQ to be right on top of the number. So I'm going to go to the code and I'm going to do another math function. And I'm just going to add like we did before. I'm going to open up the bracket and say I plus 0.4, which is a very nice amount for me. And now I have basically the NASDAQ and the code, but I'm still not done yet. What I want to do right now, I want to actually create the actual arrows that goes up and down and show me what amount of data I'm receiving. So I'm going to go back into my assets. I'm going to, in this case, use the super ngon. I'm just going to use it as the simplest way possible for the ngon. So I'm just going to bring it over here. I'm going to put it inside a group, and I want to show you why in a second. We'll call this arrows. And this is going to represent my up arrow. I'm going to go into my ngon. I'm going to change my vertices into 3. So as you can see right now, this is basically a triangle. If I'll just move it outside of the box, we can see it slightly better. So it's a triangle. And of course, triangle shows up right now. So I'm going to give him the color green to know that it's going up and back into my group here. The second thing, I'm just going to throw it back into the position. Let's say it's right now in the middle, and I'm going to make it slightly smaller. Sorry, this is 0.6. So will fitting nicely within our text here. And I'm also going to do the alignment for the left. So when I'm connecting it after the number, it will be aligned to the left side, like we did with the code. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to actually duplicate this by doing Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to duplicate it twice. I'm going to separate the colors. So I'll have the first color will be red. I'm going to do, this is going to be my down value. And my null is going to be my no change. So this one, I'm going to change the name into down. That's my O. And I'm going to call it null, just so I'll know this one actually stands for nothing. So this is going to, I'm going to rotate this 180. And I'm going to have my null around 30 degrees. So let's do minus 30, just to make sure it's in the right position. That's look okay. So I'm gonna make sure they are all centered correctly. This is gonna be slightly, all right, so it's look like it's centered correctly. Now I'm gonna make sure they're all again into our 0. And like I did before, after my code, I will want to create another out connection from the right side of the bounding box. So I'm going to go again to out connection, and I'm going to go into the arrows X connection, and going to do in connection to the X property, connect, and now you can see that it's aligned to the right side. And like we did before, I'm going to do another function. Exactly like we did before, I'm going to do I plus 0.2 in this case, which is quite nice and has a nice difference. Now, in order to actually see the right value, I'm going to do another internal connection. This time, I'm going to take the actual value that I'm going to be receiving for my data here. I'm going to do out connection from this value, and I'm actually going to connect it into my arrows visibility. Actually, no, sorry, not visibility. I'm going to actually connect it to the child mode. If you don't know, our child mode is basically showing one group within the same group. So if I have a group here, child mode number 1 will only show me the first line within this group. And it doesn't matter if it's a single object or a group within a group. So each time it's going to show me a different marker. In this case, I can jump between null, down, and up, and show the right amount that I want. But to know which one, I have to make an internal connection. So like I said before, I'm connecting the out connection from the text string. So I'm going to do, again, out connection from here, going into the arrows into the single child mode. And in the single child mode selector, I'm going to create in connection and connect. Now, it's not going to right now give me the right amount because I'm actually receiving a number which is 0.55. This is not a good number for me. So I'm going to do another function within that child mode to determine which number I want to show. So I'm going to do a function here, and I'm going to create an if condition. This if condition is going to state what happens if that condition is meant. So I'm going to do if I, my internal connection is bigger than 0, which is any number between 0.00001 and above. If it's bigger than 0, then I want to show the output will be 1. technically, right now, it's just going to show me 1, but I need to do also the other options. So I'm going to use the else if. So I'm going to say else if. So if, again, I is going to be smaller than 0, I want to use number 2, which means a negative number. And I want my third condition. I can actually say if I is equal to 0, or I can leave it else, which is anything else. But I'm just going to make sure I'm going to do else. I'm going to say I equals to 0, then it's going to be 0. Now, to test this, I'm actually going to create an export so we can actually control it from outside. So I'm going to go into my value, and this will be the export that's going to be connected in Maestro Live. I'm going to do create export here. And now if I'll change this into a negative number, you'll see that it changes into red. If I'll have a 0 value, it actually changes into, sorry, I think I did a wrong math function here. I should have done instead of 0, let's have 0, 3, which is the null. So else. All right, so now you can see I have the null marker, the blue one. I'm just going to make it a little slightly bigger here so you can see. So if I'll get a 0 number, I'm going to create getting a null, a blue rectangle. So now let's test it again. 1 will be positive, minus 0.4, for example, will be negative, and 0 will be null. So right now I have basically the connection inside. So when I'm connecting those exports from Maestro News, I will be receiving the right arrow to show me if it's going up or down and everything. The last thing that I want to do, I want to make sure that my background will always be at the same size of my information. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to put all those texts into a group. When I'm going to put them inside a group, it's basically going to calculate the entire bounding box of this group as one individual. And I can say, I'm going to take the width of this bounding box, the width of this group, which is going to be my data. So I'm going to do out connection and connect this one into the group Y scale. So this, sorry, to the X scale. I'm going to do in connection and connect. And right now you can see that the connection is exactly the same amount as my text. Like we did many, many times this session, I can also create another function in order to have the spacing between them. So I can add a minus 0.1 or minus 0.4 on the I in the internal connection here, just to make it slightly bigger. So like we did, I'm going to do function. And again, I'm going to do I plus 0.4. I want a little bit slightly bigger. So you can see I have here the number slightly bigger. I can also connect the text, the left side. So I'm going to do the out connection for the left to the, again, this group exposition and connect. And I'm going to do another function here just to make it slightly on the side. So I'm going to do I plus 0.2. Oh, sorry, minus. I want it to be minus because I want it on the other side. And now it's actually right in the middle. I have a little bit of spacing between each side, which is exactly what I want. in order to see it in my ticker, I'm going to use the rebuild ticker function. This is actually going to make sure everything is being rebuilt. As you can see now, it's repeating itself, but inside Maestro Live, we're going to send on each duplicate of that function a different, basically a different value that will come from the database. So it will show us different stacks and sites for everything. So the only thing that's left to do is to hide my box and again, align that ticker group to exactly the right place I want it to be. Maybe slightly on the side here and creating the offset a little bit. And now when it's perfect the way I want it, I can save this scene, open up my Maestro Live, which we're going to go over in a different session. And I'm going to play my animation. So this is how we are actually dealing with data. With those functions, we can actually create a lot more diverse type of functions and animations and playing with all kind of manipulation of data that coming in from outside sources. And this is how we are dealing with data within a Maestro Designer. So if you have any questions, now it's the time. So, Dawn, do we have any questions?
Thank you. Yep. We have a couple quick ones since we're running up on the time here. Is there a limit to the number of connections you can have?
Well, internal connections, you can have up to 9 connections within the same object. Between different objects, there is no limitations. Between different objects, you can do as many as, don't forget that all of it is database, it's data, so it means it takes amount of memory, but for our technical point of view, the limitation will be a few millions. But within the same object, to the same object, I can connect up to 9. And the naming of them is going to change between I for the first one, and then I1, I2, I3, up to I9, which will be, sorry, I8 will be the top one. So you can add up to 9 internal connections into the same object.
Okay. And another one question had come in from Max. Am I correct that you're able to connect to a child versus the parent?
Well, technically, the internal connection is it's basically referring this referring the property to a different. So it's not exactly child and parent. It's more of a refer type, but it's going only one way. You cannot send the information back from the out. I mean, from the in connection, only sending from the out connection. It's a one-way connection.
All right, perfect. That looks like all the questions we have for right now. So if people do have questions, go ahead and send them to me at liveonlinelearning@avid.com. I also have posted here our sessions for next week, and you can find those at avid.com/online learning webinars. So thank you for the great presentation today. There was a lot with the data and the layering. It was awesome to see it working and how much you're able to add those little details to make a great graphic. So we really appreciate you presenting today for the session. So with that, we'll let everyone get back on with their day or evening or morning, as we had people even dialing in from the Philippines today. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Yor. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.